I spent an entire year being publicly humiliated by my boss at every opportunity, criticized in meetings, given impossible deadlines, blamed for his mistakes in front of clients. What Marcus didn't know was that while he was busy tearing me down, I was quietly documenting everything, building relationships with upper management, and positioning myself as the obvious choice to replace him. By Christmas, I wasn't just surviving his abuse, I was sitting in his office while he cleaned out his desk. Let me take you back to January of this year, because that's when Marcus Hayes became my boss and my life at Riverside Marketing became a nightmare I had to endure every single day. I'm Natalie Chen, and I'd been working at Riverside for 3 years as a senior account manager. I was good at my job, really good. I had strong client relationships, I consistently hit my targets, and I genuinely loved what I did. When our department director retired in December, I actually thought I had a shot at the promotion. I'd been there longer than most people, I knew the systems inside and out, and several clients had specifically requested to work with me. They hired Marcus instead. Marcus came from a competitor agency with an impressive resume and a confident handshake. He was 42, walked around in expensive suits, and had this way of dominating a room the second he entered it. In his first week, he called an all-team meeting to introduce himself and lay out his vision. "I believe in excellence," he announced, standing at the head of the conference table like he was delivering a TED Talk. "I believe in accountability, and I believe that this team has been operating with too much hand-holding and not enough results-driven focus." I remember glancing around the table at my colleagues. Brian, Shayna, Marcus T. Yes, we had 2 Marcuses, which got confusing fast, and Jennifer. We were all confused. Hand-holding? Our team had exceeded quarterly targets for the past 18 months straight. But that was just the beginning. Marcus's management style became clear within the first month. He was a bully. Not in an obvious screaming and throwing things way that would get him reported to HR immediately. He was much more subtle than that, which made it worse. He'd undermine you in small ways, chip away at your confidence, make you doubt yourself until you were too anxious to push back. His favorite target? Me. It started with small comments in meetings. I'd present a campaign strategy I'd developed, and before I could even finish, Marcus would interrupt. "I'm going to stop you right there, Natalie," he'd say, holding up one hand. "This approach is way too safe, too conventional. This is exactly the kind of thinking that keeps agencies stuck in mediocrity." Then he'd proceed to suggest modifications that were essentially my ideas reworded slightly, and everyone would nod along like he was a genius. Or I'd send him a client report for review, and he'd return it covered in red-tracked changes. Not substantive edits, but nitpicky things like word choices and formatting. Then in our next team meeting, he'd say something like, "Natalie's reports need a lot of work before they're client-ready. We can't be sending out subpar materials." The thing is, those same reports had been praised by clients and my previous boss for 3 years. But suddenly, under Marcus, nothing I did was good enough. The real humiliation started in March. We had a huge pitch meeting with a potential client, Greenhouse Athletics, a mid-sized sporting goods company looking to rebrand. I'd been the lead on developing the pitch strategy, spent weeks researching their market position, their competitors, their target demographics. I'd created the entire presentation deck, coordinated with our creative team, prepared responses to potential objections. The morning of the pitch, Marcus called me into his office. "I'm going to lead the presentation," he said, not looking up from his computer. I stood there, confused. I thought I was presenting. I developed the entire strategy. "And I appreciate that groundwork," he said in a tone that suggested he didn't appreciate it at all. "But this is a high-stakes pitch, and I need to make sure we're putting our best foot forward. You can handle the Q&A portion if there are any technical questions." I felt like I'd been slapped. This was my pitch, my work, and he was relegating me to backup. But I smiled and said, "Of course, whatever you think is best." The meeting pitch itself was excruciating. Marcus presented my strategy almost word for word from my notes, but he presented it like it was his brilliant thinking. Every time one of the greenhouse executives asked a question, I'd start to answer, and Marcus would talk over me. "What Natalie means is," he'd say, then proceed to repeat exactly what I'd just said. We got the account, and in the celebration meeting afterward, Marcus took full credit. "I'm really proud of the strategy we developed," he announced to the team. "This is the kind of innovative thinking that's going to set us apart." He said we, but he meant him. That's when I started paying closer attention to everything Marcus did. I noticed patterns. He'd take credit for other people's work constantly, not just mine. He'd blame team members for his own mistakes. He'd promise clients things without consulting the people who'd have to deliver, then act shocked when we couldn't meet his unrealistic timelines. In April, he threw me under the bus in front of a client. We were in a review meeting with Peterson Financial, one of my oldest accounts. I'd been managing their marketing for 2 years, and we had a great relationship. But Marcus had decided he needed to be in all client meetings now to ensure quality. The client mentioned that their recent email campaign had lower open rates than expected. It was true, the rates were down about 3% from the previous quarter. Not ideal, but not a disaster either. I'd already identified the issue, subject line testing needed refinement, and had a plan to address it. Before I could explain any of this, Marcus jumped in. "This is unacceptable," he said, looking at me with disappointment that seemed way over the top for a 3% dip. "I've been monitoring them, and I've already identified—" "We'll get this corrected immediately," Marcus interrupted, turning back to the client. "I apologize that Natalie's attention to detail hasn't been what it should be. I'll be personally overseeing this account going forward." The client actually looked uncomfortable. The CEO, Richard Peterson, had worked with me for 2 years. He knew I was detail-oriented and responsive. "Actually, Natalie's been great," Richard said carefully. "These things happen. I'm not concerned." But Marcus had already made his point. He'd publicly blamed me for a minor issue and positioned himself as the person who'd fix my incompetence. After the meeting, I went to the bathroom and cried. Not because I couldn't handle criticism, I could, but because Marcus had deliberately humiliated me in front of a client I'd worked so hard to build a relationship with for no reason other than to make himself look important. That's when I decided I wasn't just going to survive Marcus Hayes, I was going to outlast him. I started documenting everything. Every meeting where he took credit for someone else's work, I noted the date, who was present, what was said. Every time he threw someone under the bus, documented. Every unrealistic promise he made to clients, documented. Every instance of him blaming his team for his own failures, documented. I created a folder on my personal laptop, not the work computer, I wasn't stupid, and I saved everything. Emails where he contradicted himself, meeting notes where his version of events differed from what actually happened, client feedback that proved his criticisms of me were unfounded. But I didn't just collect evidence. I started being strategic. I began building relationships with people Marcus hadn't bothered to cultivate. The executive team, especially our VP of Operations, Angela Morrison. I'd send Angela brief updates on projects, always framed as FYI emails, never complaining about Marcus, but making sure she knew what I was working on. I volunteered for cross-departmental initiatives that gave me visibility with senior leadership. I made sure I was always early to company-wide meetings so I could chat with executives before things started. I asked thoughtful questions during presentations. I made myself memorable in positive ways. Meanwhile, Marcus kept digging his own grave. In June, he completely botched the Riverside Summer Campaign, our biggest internal marketing push of the year. He'd insisted on taking over the strategy despite 3 different people telling him his approach wouldn't work. When it failed to generate the engagement he'd promised, he blamed our creative team, then our analytics team, then finally settled on blaming me for not providing adequate market research. I had emails proving I provided extensive research that he'd ignored. I didn't show them to anyone yet. I just added them to my folder. In July, Marcus scheduled a meeting with our biggest client, Silverstone Tech, without telling anyone on the team. He showed up unprepared,
couldn't answer their questions and made promises about deliverables that we couldn't possibly meet in the timeline he'd committed to. I found out about it when Silverstone's marketing director, Hannah, called me directly. "Natalie, what's going on?" she asked. "Marcus just promised us a complete website redesign and new brand guidelines in 6 weeks. That's not realistic, is it?" "No, it's not," I said honestly. "A project that scope would take at least 12 weeks, probably more. Let me talk to Marcus and figure out what happened." I went to Marcus's office. He was on his phone, scrolling through something. "Marcus, I just got a call from Hannah at Silverstone. She said you promised them a 6-week turnaround on a website redesign." He barely looked up. "Yeah, they need it fast. I told them we could do it." "We can't do it in 6 weeks, not at the quality level they expect." "Then I guess you'll need to work harder," he said dismissively. "Figure it out, Natalie. That's your job." This was classic Marcus. Make impossible promises, then blame everyone else when reality didn't cooperate. I went back to my desk and called Hannah back. "Here's what I can actually do," I told her. "I can give you a revised brand guidelines package in 6 weeks, and we can phase the website redesign over 12 weeks with strategic milestone deliveries. You'll start seeing results quickly, but we won't compromise quality by rushing." She loved that plan. She also said something interesting. "I wish I could just work with you directly, Natalie. Marcus seems scattered." I filed that comment away mentally. August was when Marcus's humiliation tactics reached their peak. We had our quarterly all-company meeting, where each department presented their results and plans. Marcus was supposed to present for our team, but he decided at the last minute that I should present instead, not as a generous opportunity, but as a setup. He gave me the assignment 2 days before the meeting, knowing I was already swamped with 3 client deadlines. He provided almost no guidance except to say, "Just make sure it makes the department look good." I worked until midnight both nights, pulling together a presentation that showcased our wins, acknowledged our challenges, and laid out a strategic vision for Q4. I was proud of it. The morning of the meeting, Marcus reviewed my slides for the first time. "This won't work," he said flatly. "The messaging is off, the data visualization is confusing, and your strategic recommendations are too vague." "What specifically would you like me to change?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "All of it," he said. "You've got 2 hours. Figure it out." 2 hours before a presentation to the entire company, including the CEO, he was asking me to rebuild the entire thing. I did my best. I clarified the data, tightened the messaging, added more specific tactics to the strategic recommendations. It still wasn't perfect. You can't completely rebuild a quarterly presentation in 2 hours, but it was solid. During the meeting, I presented to about 60 people. I got through most of it smoothly, though I could feel Marcus watching me from his seat with an expression I couldn't quite read. When I finished, our CEO, Thomas Brennan, nodded approvingly. "Strong work. I especially appreciate the proactive thinking around the Q4 initiatives." Before I could thank him, Marcus stood up. "I appreciate Natalie's effort here," he said, his voice projecting across the room. "Though I do want to note that this presentation had to be significantly revised at the last minute due to some initial missteps in messaging and strategy. It's a learning opportunity for her." The room went silent. You could feel the awkwardness radiating from every corner. Thomas looked confused. The presentation seemed well prepared to me. "It is now," Marcus said smoothly, "after substantial revisions this morning." He'd just publicly criticized me in front of the entire company for problems he'd created by giving me an impossible timeline. And he'd done it in a way that made him look like the quality control expert who'd saved the presentation. I smiled, thanked everyone for their time, and sat down. Inside, I was screaming, but outside, I maintained perfect composure. After the meeting, Angela Morrison approached me in the hallway. "That was a strong presentation, Natalie," she said quietly. "Don't let Marcus's comments undermine that." "Thank you," I said. "I appreciate that." She studied my face for a moment. "How's it doing working for him?" "Honestly,
This was a dangerous question. If I complained, I could look like someone who couldn't handle criticism. If I pretended everything was fine, I'd be lying to someone who clearly already suspected the truth. "It's been an adjustment," I said carefully. "Different management style than I'm used to, but I'm learning." Angela nodded slowly. "If you ever need to talk, officially or unofficially, my door is open." That conversation told me something important. Other people were noticing Marcus's behavior. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't being too sensitive. Marcus was actually a problem, and senior leadership was starting to see it. I doubled down on my strategy. September and October were more of the same. Marcus would undermine me in meetings, take credit for my work, set me up for failure with impossible deadlines, but I kept documenting everything, kept delivering excellent work despite him, kept building relationships across the company. I also started having quiet conversations with the team members who reported to Marcus alongside me. Brian confided that Marcus had blamed him for a budget overrun that was actually Marcus's miscalculation. Shayna said Marcus had told a client she was still learning the ropes, even though she'd been in marketing for 8 years. We were all suffering under him. The difference was, I was building a case. In early November, everything started coming together. Marcus made a catastrophic error with our second biggest client, Evermore Hospitality. He'd promised them a complete digital marketing overhaul without consulting anyone on the actual execution. When the client asked for a detailed project timeline and budget, Marcus threw together some numbers that were wildly inaccurate. He underestimated the budget by about 40% and the timeline by 3 months. I found out about it when our finance director, Kevin, called me in a panic. "Natalie, did you review the Evermore proposal Marcus submitted?" "No, I didn't even know there was a proposal. What's wrong?" "The numbers make no sense. He's promised deliverables at a cost that won't even cover our basic expenses, let alone leave any profit margin. If we execute at these numbers, we'll lose money on one of our biggest accounts." My heart sank. "Can we revise the proposal?" "It's already signed. Marcus presented it directly to their executive team yesterday and got their approval. He's telling everyone it's a huge win." This was bad, really bad. If we delivered on what Marcus promised, the company would lose tens of thousands of dollars. If we didn't deliver, we'd lose a major client and damage our reputation. I asked Kevin to send me the full proposal. Then I spent 3 hours building a realistic version. What the project would actually cost, what timeline was feasible, what resources we'd need. The real numbers were dramatically different from what Marcus had promised.
Then I did something bold. I requested a meeting with Angela Morrison. "I need to bring something to your attention," I told her when we sat down in her office. "We have a serious problem with the Evermore account." I walked her through everything. The unrealistic proposal Marcus had submitted, the actual costs versus what he'd promised, the impossible timeline, the potential financial loss to the company. Angela's expression grew darker as I talked. "Does Marcus know these numbers are wrong?" "I don't know if he knows or if he didn't do the analysis," I said honestly. "But either way, we're locked into a contract that will lose money." "What do you recommend?" This was my moment. "I think we need to have a transparent conversation with Evermore. Explain that there was an error in the initial proposal, present the realistic timeline and budget, and offer them options. We'll take a credibility hit, but it's better than losing money or failing to deliver." Angela nodded slowly. "Prepare a presentation with the full analysis and the proposed solution. I'm calling a meeting with Thomas for tomorrow." The next day, I presented to Angela and Thomas Brennan, our CEO. I laid out everything calmly and factually, with full documentation. I didn't editorialize or blame Marcus directly. I just showed the numbers and the reality of what we were facing. Thomas was quiet for a long time after I finished. Then he said, "Where's Marcus in all this?" "He's in client meetings today," Angela said. "I didn't want to wait to address this." "Good call." Thomas looked at me. You've done excellent work identifying this problem and developing a solution. I want you to lead the conversation with Evermore. Fix this." "Of course," I said. As I was leaving, Thomas added, "Natalie, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I want an honest answer. Is this an isolated incident, or is there a pattern here? I could have downplayed it, could have protected Marcus, could have played it safe. Instead, I said, I think there's a pattern, and I think other people on the team could provide additional perspective if asked." Thomas and Angela exchanged a look. "Thank you for your honesty," Thomas said. Over the next 2 weeks, things moved quickly. I met with Evermore, explained the situation with complete transparency, and presented the revised proposal. They weren't happy about the error, but they appreciated the honesty and agreed to the new terms. Crisis averted, though we'd taken a reputation hit. Meanwhile, Angela and Thomas started having quiet conversations with other members of our team. Brian, Shayna, Marcus T., Jennifer, they all confirmed what I'd suggested. Marcus was taking credit for others' work, making unrealistic promises, blaming his team for his mistakes. I learned later that they also reviewed Marcus's client communications and found multiple instances of him making commitments without proper analysis or team consultation. The first week of December, Marcus was called into a meeting with Thomas and Angela. I wasn't there, but word spreads fast in an office. He was placed on a performance improvement plan, essentially a formal warning that he was on thin ice. Marcus came back from that meeting looking shaken. He barely spoke to anyone for the rest of the day. The next morning, he called me into his office. "You went to Angela about Evermore," he said. "It wasn't a question." "I escalated a problem that needed executive attention," I said calmly. "The numbers in your proposal were going to cost the company significant money." "You made me look incompetent." "I provided accurate information about a contract you'd already signed. What happened after that wasn't my decision." He stared at me, and I could see him trying to figure out how to spin this, how to make me the villain. But there was no angle. The numbers didn't lie. "You've been working against me this whole time," he said quietly. "No," I said. "I've been doing my job. The difference is I've been doing it accurately." That conversation was on a Wednesday. By Friday, Marcus had submitted his resignation. The official story was that he'd decided to pursue other opportunities. Everyone knew what that meant. The following Monday, Thomas called an all-hands meeting for our department. "I want to address the leadership transition," he said. "Marcus Hayes is no longer with the company. We appreciate his contributions and wish him well in his future endeavors." There was a pause, and then Thomas continued. "After careful consideration and consultation with department leadership, we've decided to promote from within. Effective immediately, Natalie Chen will be taking over as Director of Marketing." I felt everyone's eyes on me. Brian started clapping, and then Shayna joined in, and then the whole room was applauding. I became the director. I got Marcus's office, his title, his salary, though, unlike him, I planned to actually earn it. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of transition. Meetings, strategic planning sessions, one-on-ones with my new team. I worked with each person to understand their goals, their frustrations, what they needed to succeed. "I'm not going to manage the way Marcus did," I told them in our first team meeting. "I believe in transparency, collaboration, and giving credit where it's due. Your work is your work. My job is to support you, remove obstacles, and make sure you have what you need to excel." The relief on their faces told me everything I needed to know about how bad it had been. Christmas week, I was working late in my new office, yes, Marcus's old office, which still felt surreal, when there was a knock on my door. It was Angela Morrison. "Got a minute?" she asked. "Of course." She sat down across from my desk. I wanted to tell you something. When we hired Marcus, I had reservations. His resume was impressive, but something felt off in the interviews. I let myself be overruled because he had the experience on paper. You couldn't have known how he'd actually perform. Maybe not, but I should have listened to my instincts. She paused. You know what convinced Thomas and me that you were the right choice for this role? The Evermore situation? Partly, but more than that, it was how you handled yourself this entire year. Marcus was actively undermining you, taking credit for your work, publicly criticizing you, and you never retaliated. You never badmouthed him. You just kept doing excellent work and building relationships across the company. That's real leadership. I felt my throat get tight. Thank you. That means a lot. You earn this, Natalie. Not by tearing someone else down, but by being consistently excellent, even when it would have been easier to give up or get bitter. After she left, I sat alone in the quiet office and thought about the past year. Marcus had tried to break me. He'd humiliated me in meetings, stolen my ideas, blamed me for his failures, made me doubt myself at every turn. There were so many moments when I wanted to quit, when I wanted to confront him, when I wanted to scream about how unfair it all was. But I'd chosen a different path. I documented instead of reacting. I'd built relationships instead of burning bridges. I'd focused on doing excellent work instead of engaging in his games. And in the end, Marcus's own behavior destroyed him. I didn't have to sabotage him or plot against him. I just had to be patient, strategic, and let the truth speak for itself. On Christmas Eve, I was packing up to leave the office when I noticed something on my desk, a card from the team. Inside, everyone had signed it and written messages. Thanks for being a real leader, Brian. Can't wait to see where you take us, Shayna. So glad you're our boss now, Jennifer. I drove home with that card on my passenger seat, thinking about how much had changed. A year ago, I'd walked into a meeting expecting normalcy and walked out with a boss who would spend 12 months trying to destroy my confidence. Now, I was sitting in his chair, leading his team, fixing the damage he had done. The best revenge isn't getting even. It's becoming so successful that the person who tried to hurt you becomes irrelevant to your story. Marcus Hayes spent a year trying to humiliate me. I spent that year quietly building the case that I was the better choice for the job he thought he had secured. By Christmas, he was gone, and I was exactly where I belonged. Merry Christmas to me.